And we had several people register, so they might be running a little late, but they're going to have to catch the replay because, time is money. And who better to talk about money is Miss Accountant Lady. She is the one. She's the one that knows about money, how to manage our money, how to manage money in general. Miss Janelle Miley. She is actually my personal accountant for both of my companies. So grateful that I was able to find her. She is like the creme de la creme. And I'm real picky. So so if I say it, then it got to be true. So she is the CEO of Global Strategies Accounting and Bookkeeping Firm. She operates out of Florida and Maryland, but that's not the limitation. She also provides services. Is it throughout the country? Throughout the country, because I'm in Georgia and she provides services for my companies. So, of course, we're good to go. She's had her firm for over 14 years and has her MBA and she has her MBA, executive MBA, undergraduate in accounting. So she is all of that in a bag of chips. And I'm serious when I say that. I was just so happy.
All of that.
All of that. So happy to have her. Before you introduce yourself, Janelle, I just want to still go over like the housekeeping rules. Please, if you're not speaking, go ahead and mute yourself. And you can ask questions as long as we're, on that topic. Let's try to stay on the topic and ask questions based on that because chances are we're going to be going through that thing somewhere in the slide presentation. So with that, Ms. Janelle, take it away.
Well, thank you, Sheena, for inviting me to be on your podcast. I was really excited about participating on your podcast. So thank you again. So yes, so we've been in business for about 14 years now. We have a team of 12 accountants now. I just hired another person. And we are located all over the United States and in terms of the clients that we support from the East Coast all the way over to the West Coast. We have clients in California, Texas, all up and down the East Coast and some other places as well. Denver, Colorado, I forgot about that one. Yeah, so we're in a lot of places and supporting businesses. Our specialty is government contractors. That's what we excel at. That's what we're really good at. Also nonprofits, but government contractors, we love working with them because it is government contractors can go from zero revenues to $1 million in revenue with just one contract.
Tell them again. That is so true. So true.
Just one contract. So
one contract. And that's so important because, a lot of us, when we get into government contracting, we may not even really be ready for $1 million. And it could come, whether it's a subcontract or something you bid on and it turns into something beautiful, like $1 million, but we still have that small business thinking. And so we don't even know what we don't know. And most people who are startups, they're not going to have an accountant. And so I did a video on what I wish I knew when I started government contracting. I wish I had an accountant day one, because accountant and bookkeeper, because going back to try to fix that stuff, Janelle's going to charge you a lot of money. Okay. And so will any other accountant or bookkeeper, because it's a lot of work. And if it wasn't a lot of work, you would do it yourself. Right. But most of us don't want to do it. We don't understand how to do it. And so I really appreciate an accountant and a bookkeeping company that is focused on government contracting, because there are just so many nuances. And also, if they don't understand it, you could potentially, run into some compliance issues. So we're going to get into that in just a minute. All right. So go to this next one. Again, what's the point of winning $1 million if you don't know how to spend the money? And that's spend the money when you are in the contract, like on the things you need to provide, the best way to spend the money on that contract. And then with your profit, because if that's your only contract for a year and your profit is, let's say, $250,000, this is the most money you ever had in your life, you're going to blow that money. I mean, that's just, it's like no shade. It's more like the money is so plentiful at that moment, you're not even realizing that, okay, once that profit runs out, guess what, boo-boo? If it's a whole year of a contract, you still have some time that you need to survive. especially some of us that took a leap and quit our job and all this stuff, because $1 million sounds really, really plush until it's gone. All your profit is gone, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to elaborate on that at all, Janelle?
Yeah. So, I mean, when you win $1 million contract, it doesn't mean you have $1 million to spend, because your contract was awarded based on what you said you were going to do, whether it was services or materials, whatever it is. You have to pay your people that are going to be working on that contract first. And it's important to understand what are your costs that have to be paid out of that contract, because oftentimes when budgets are developed, the budgets aren't as accurate as they need to be. And this is where a good accountant comes into play to help you develop your budget so that you are covering all of your costs as well as your indirect costs that are also added. I mean, in order for you to run a business, you're going to have a cell phone. You're going to have, office space or a virtual office or whatever. You're going to have these other costs that are going to be incurred. So you need to make sure that the budget that you propose covers your direct costs as well as some of your indirect costs. And then the difference is your net profit. Now, it's wonderful to think that, oh, great, I won this contract. It's $1 million a year. It's $250,000 maybe a month, a couple months that you can bill up to. So remember that you can bill up to a certain amount on the CLIN line. And
what's the CLIN line, Janelle? Look, you started to go.
Okay.
What's the CLIN line? And we're talking about federal, right? So
we're talking about federal contracts. Federal contracts all have what's called a budget line. It's called a CLIN line. And the CLIN line might be, let's say it's a cleaning contract, and you are supposed to, and we're just paying labor, and you're going in to clean up the office building, several office buildings, and they say that for this supervisor, you can bill up to $300,000 for the year. For this laborer on another CLIN line, which is a budget line, you can bill up to $100,000 a year.
So does my profit come out of that as well? When I'm billing the government $100,000 for this laborer, is that with the anticipation for that year that I'm going to take, let's say, $50,000 out of that as my profit, for example?
So let's take a step back, because you have to look at your budget, what you created for your budget. And you should see that your profit margin is maybe 10%. And you're estimating it's going to be, if you're billing like you're supposed to be billing every month, that 10%, you should have maybe 50,000 left over or 20,000 left over. That should be kind of your profit margin, because that doesn't take into consideration your indirects that have to be added onto that.
So indirect is the same as overhead.
That's exactly right. Indirect are your overhead and G&A costs. That's what makes up your indirect costs, or your G&A and your overhead. So before you do a budget and before you bid on a contract, you should know what your overhead rate is. Your rate is.
Wait. How we know that? Should we consult before we even we see a solicitation and it's 2 months out and we're like, Lord have mercy, it's $1 million. I don't know how to do any of this. Should you consult the best person to be an accountant?
Oh, absolutely right. Because you need to make sure you're bidding enough to cover all of your costs to just operate the contract. I have seen companies bid on contracts, win them, and it costs them more to work the contract than anything else. So they're paying the government, basically.
Paying the government for the contract.
That's exactly right. So all of this starts with your accounting infrastructure, your accounting systems, to make sure that your accounts, your accounting system is set up right.
Okay, we're
What do
gonna
I
get to
mean
that.
by
We're gonna get
okay?
to that.
Okay.
I know that's the whole thing. Okay, so I know you might be a little biased, but when it comes to consulting with an accountant, probably a silly question, but should they be very well versed in government contracting? Like, say we don't have Janelle, say we can't afford Janelle, right? Because there's not a lot of hyper focused government contracting accountants. I would just assume after the ones that I fired in the past, right? So would another accountant or someone that has taken an accountant, at least a class, forgive my ignorance, would they still be able to say, I know how to do cost analysis, so you should be able to just roll this out based on an accounting principle?
Okay, so I'll tell you right off the bat, you want someone who knows government contracting.
Yes.
If they don't know government contracting, you need to run, because you have to have the setup first.
Okay.
And if they don't understand government contracting and what the end result is supposed to look like, they don't understand a DCAA compliant system. If they don't understand all of those things, then you don't have the right infrastructure in place to bid accurately.
To even bid. Okay. So, and we were going to get into that a little bit, but since that's a great segue, now questions that people have asked me is, okay, I'm doing federal contract, and I've heard of DCAA compliance, which is, I guess, the auditing. Explain that for what that actually is, so I don't say it wrong.
Yeah, it's Defense Contract Audit Agency.
Got it.
Before you can get a Department of Defense contract, you have to be approved that you actually can handle the contract. And what does that mean? That means they want to look at your accounting system, look at all of your internal processes on how you handle payroll, how you handle paying your bills, how you handle your financial reporting. They want to see all of this.
Lord.
And it's called it's called a SF 1408, a pre-award letter. They will send that out to you and say, you need to fill this out. This is a questionnaire, and you gotta know how to answer each of those questions. And then they will come in, or actually what they prefer to do is for you to hire an outside auditor to come in and be able to sign off on that letter.
An outside auditor. Where do I find them?
Outside auditor. So with our clients, we work with some of the auditors that can do that kind of work. And we try to, because usually it's a young company, so we try to negotiate their fee down as low as possible so that they can come in and do that work.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Humor me. The lowest price that I guess you have been able to get your client for an outside audit, that I guess, I don't know if it varies based on how much the contract is, but what's a price range?
So the contract value is irrelevant.
Okay.
It's a pre-award letter and a pre-award audit, which is basically, it's like 15 questions. And all of those questions have to be answered a certain way. We've gotten the price down, maybe $500, $400. Okay. It's not a lot of time. Literally, the auditor can be there for maybe, 20 minutes.
Oh, okay.
So it's a quickie.
But it's still worth it, because
it's
otherwise
worth it.
You may not even get it. So leading into the systems, right? Well, let me stop and ask the question. Does anyone here already have an accountant? Just either raise your hand or come off mute and say yes, or any of that. Nobody?
No, I'm looking for one. Found one.
You found
we
one.
Are.
So no one on the call has an accountant, and I get it, because I mean it's if you're not making any money, and even if you haven't started your business, I get it. But she's telling you that really before you even get the money, you need to have an accountant. So what does that actually look like? So one of the questions that I got at the beginning when I first started was, or the conversation in the government contracting world is you can't use QuickBooks. Now, of course, we know that Foresight Industries use QuickBooks, and you have set it up in such a way that it makes it compliant. Can you kind of go over that a little bit? Like how, like the key points of what kind of makes it more compliant compared to not compliant, I guess.
Okay. So the whole point of a DCAA compliant system means that the information that goes in cannot be changed or manipulated at all to produce the report. So what does that mean? That means that when, for instance, a DCAA compliant system will have, let's use QuickBooks for example. It's not only the way the chart of accounts is set up, because that's a huge piece, making sure your chart of accounts is set up in the correct manner with direct costs and indirect costs below. But it's also, what it does is that for like payroll, you would use, for instance, maybe QuickBooks payroll and QuickBooks timekeeping system, because you're not entering in any hours into the system. It's all automated. It all links together. You run the payroll. You don't go outside of the accounting system to another system to generate payroll. It's all done within that one environment. That's what they're looking for. Now,
if I have ADP and I have QuickBooks accounting, I mean, essentially, because I'll just use me. I mean, y'all know I'm transparent, everybody that's on the call, but if I'm using QuickBooks for like invoicing and to pay like subcontractors, but I'm using ADP for payroll, is there any way that both of those can be married and live happily ever after? Or does it still need to somewhat go through like the basic accounting system such as QuickBooks?
Okay, so you can purchase a link so that the system links to QuickBooks, but it starts with the timekeeping system first. If you all are going after government contractors, contracts, definitely get a timekeeping system. 100%, you have to have a timekeeping system.
Can you give some of your favorites? I know there's one internal to QuickBooks. We personally use timesheets. That's like an outsourced separate system. Do you have any other favorites?
There are no favorites. I mean, those are very straightforward. Yeah. ADP has their own timekeeping system too. But the bottom line is you have to have a timekeeping system so that you're tracking time, and that timekeeping system links to your payroll system so that the hours automatically go into that system, and the system automatically updates your accounting system too. So that's what they're looking for in terms of a DCAA compliant system.
Got it. Okay. So, I mean, I've worked with Janelle, so a lot of it makes sense to me because she's giving me my lashings every couple of weeks, like, So it makes a lot more sense to me, but I don't want to just, assume that everybody understands. Does anyone have any questions so far about the DCAA compliance and QuickBooks and that type of thing? Well, y'all just in learn mode right now. I'm
so
surprised.
There are other systems out there. There's Deltek, which is a couple $100,000. There's Sage Intact. There's also Uninet, and another system I've never used is Jamis. Now, these systems are expensive. Uninet is not as expensive as Deltek, but the systems are not user-friendly. You have to, there are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You have to have an accountant that has the expertise using those systems.
So after I paid $100,000 for this system, am I paying Global Strategies another, because it's not user friendly and it's not an easy system to use? Am I having to add that additional cost as well for the accountant?
So it depends on, what account, like for us, if we're using one of those systems, we do charge a premium to use those systems. Yeah. And this is the thing that everyone should remember too. When you get in, if you're going to get into government contracting and you are in and you want to be in the federal space, it costs money to get into that space, because you have to pay to have your infrastructure set up so that it's set up right. Otherwise, the last thing you want to happen is that you can't perform on a contract and that they take the contract away from you. Once that happens, you're not getting another contract, because those procurement officers, they all talk to each other.
That's very true. Now, I will say, don't scam Janelle, because if you get canceled for convenience, that's bad, but it's not as bad as not being able to perform and you get canceled for cause. Okay, so just keep that in mind, that it's not it's going to be rough. And again, because if even if you do be canceled for convenience, and contracting officers go to this conference and they're like, oh, Foresight Industries, they weren't even able to perform this contract. And they're like, oh, let me make sure I write them down, because I won't award them a contract either. So that's what she means. Like they have this relationship already. But if you are ever canceled, that doesn't mean that it's the end of the world, but it's pretty close. So just making sure that you guys know that it's people talk. This is a people business. So you just have to be really serious about what you're doing. This is not a side hustle. This is right. This is a real business, and you're really having to think like a large business really early on. So
I just want to question. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure. Are you going to go over a little bit more on how to establish that infrastructure?
A little bit. We're going to touch on it a little bit. She did touch on like the chart of accounts, but in depth, we're going to do that she'll do that with you if you schedule a consultation with her.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool.
So I just wanted to follow up what Sheena was saying. The rewards are significant in being a successful government contractor. I have clients that have started with a $25,000 contract, one person, and they are now up to around $50-75 million a year.
Who can use that? I need a clap emoji or raise a hand or something.
That's right. So notice I said 75 million a year. That's not the contract value. That's multiple contracts that accumulate to 75 million a year. So some of their contracts are 100 million, some of them are, 5 million, 10 million over a 5-year period. So the rewards are significant, but the main thing is, you really just have to make sure you're set up correctly. And take your time, make sure you're set up correctly. If anything you take away from this conversation today, make sure you're set up the right way as a government contractor.
And I see your hand is raised, Taloja. I want to touch on that real quick, because you made a really good point. So someone's contract may be 100 million for 5 years, and then they have another one for 5 years, that's 50 million, so on and so on. They may have 500 million in contract value, but each year they're getting 75 million. Let that sink in for a second. Like that's super major. And she's saying these people started off at 25,000. So the dream is real. So, that's why I want to just highlight that, because I didn't even catch it at first. So, okay. So, we touched on a little bit, like what makes you essentially, like, not just you, but what makes an accountant qualified to like focus on government contracting. So it's really the understanding, right? So you have to at least see what it looks like, know what the government is expecting, work in it a little bit, And then also, did you have to take like a FAR class? Do you expect your bookkeepers or your accountants that you have working under you to study the FAR, like read it from cover to cover? Like what is your process, or what is your method?
Okay, so I'll start off first. What makes an accountant an accountant bookkeeper for government contracts? Really, the accountant really has to just understand how contracts are managed, because it's all about the contract. Everything is about the contract, making sure that the client, yourselves, because I would be the bookkeeper, making sure that you're spending down the contract.
What does that
mean? When I say
spending
down the contract, that means, remember at the beginning I was talking about CLIN lines, that sort of thing, and we have this one CLIN line for a supervisor and it's $100,000. Well, if I I run the reports and I look and I say, Sheena, your supervisor, you've only billed $10,000 on this CLIN line. You need to find work for that guy so that you can bill against that CLIN line, because that money is sitting there for you.
I'm not spending up the $100,000 that I told the government I needed.
That's exactly right. And you know what they do when you don't spend down on the contract at the end of the contract?
It's theirs now.
They take it back, and if the contract renews, they'll reduce it.
So anyone, there's a couple of contracting officers on the call, but anyone that knows like how the fiscal year works, whether it's the federal fiscal year, which is, the end of September, or the state fiscal year, which is the end of June, that it's like, if you don't use it, you lose it. And so you're basically helping out the whole world by spending this money, because then the money won't be available for the next contractor that comes after you when you move on to $100 million contracts. So you're doing it for the greater good.
Okay. And oftentimes these 5-year contracts will go up for bid again.
Yes.
And you want to, one, perform, but you want to spend down all of the money, because at the end of the contract, what happens is that a different department will audit the contract and verify that you have been paid X number of dollars based on the contract value, because that's the contract closeout. That's them closing it out right there. So you really want, one, to make sure your accountant has an accounting degree. Number one.
How important is that on a scale of 1 to 10? How important is that? Is it like Pookie and them, like my sister-in-law, baby cousin Tracy, she took like a class or something? Like, how important is that?
That is that's not even on the scale of importance, how important it is.
Uber important.
That's exactly right. Because what ends up happening, you get a contract, the government says, okay, this has to be DCAA compliant. You're going to have to get your books compliant. And so you're going to want to get that done. And you don't get a lot of time to get it in place. So then you come to somebody like me.
Help! I got one day to get this right.
I'll give you an example. We had a client that came to us that needed a major cleanup of 3-4 years. Ooh. We had 5 accountants work on their books, and we got it done in 30 days.
Wow. They
had maybe 10 bank accounts, multiple Cash App accounts. It was a mess, but they paid us $50,000. So I'm telling you that price point for a reason, because it can all be avoided.
Yeah.
That's the whole point.
That goes back to me. It said my network is unstable. You can hear me good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It goes back to me saying I wish I had an accountant and a bookkeeper at the beginning. If you can get those things established and even the understanding early, then you'll know how to manage, like the self-management part. You'll know how to manage your own stuff, so you're not going crazy because of the 10 Cash Apps and all these things. It's like they'll teach you how to solidify all those things and watch your own money. So
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And the FAR as well as the DFARs, those there are tons of free classes. They're online. You don't even need the class. You can just go on and read the regulations. But the FAR rules, they guide the procurement officers on how the contract is supposed to be spent. So you should be familiar with it. Now, in the contracts themselves, they'll cite the FAR regulations in there.
I was just going to say that, like it will say in the solicitation before you even get your award, it will state what FAR they are, managed by or regulated by. So, I mean, I'm one of those people who I would probably fall asleep at the first line that I read in the FAR, but it's good to reference it when it comes to a solicitation that you're actually interested in.
That's right.
So, yeah,
that's exactly right.
I can appreciate
some of the government agencies that we've worked with.
And I'm sure there's a bunch, but let's flip that. Let's flip that, and maybe. Is there an agency that you find is a little more challenging? Do they audit more, or do they're really harping on your system more than another agency?
Okay. So one of the most difficult agencies to work with is Navy.
Wow.
Navy is your profit margins are really slim.
I had a Navy contract too. It makes sense. Makes perfect sense.
Yes,
wow.
A lot of those have SCA. Are you all familiar with SCA clauses? Where
I sure am.
Oh, what is it? Oh, Shani,
I'm over here having my dinner, but I sure am. Yes.
What is the SCA clause? Shani,
are you asking me?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's what is it called? The service contract, something that you have to pay people.
Oh, like the Davis-Bacon.
Exactly.
Yes. So that's so they tell you how much you have to pay them, a minimum wage, fringe, and everything else. And that was one of my big questions as a new person. Come on. I mean, how do I do this without a payroll company, without fringe and all of that? So, okay. Sorry.
No, thank you. I forgot it was SCA. I'm thinking wage determination, but it's SCA. So wage determination, SCA, Davis-Bacon, those are all the same.
Exactly. And the SCA, I mean, you really have to understand what position falls into what category to make sure that you're paying the correct amount, because the SCA wages, the fringe benefits and so forth, they all have to be paid and tracked. And the rates will change based on number of hours too that a per individual works as well on the labor type of contracts. If you have not prepared your proposal to take into consideration all those additional costs, that is a contract that will have you basically paying the government to work.
It's no fun if you're not going to make any money. I mean, we can all volunteer for something, and that's even worse than volunteering because you're paying. So I felt that in my spirit. All right.
Nobody has looked this up. Look it up. Unfortunately, I've seen it on a few proposals. I bugged Sheena about it. So yeah.
Yeah, anytime you're dealing with service contracts, you're gonna run into this for sure. So we touched on the compliance DCAA, and I guess one of this last question, steps to keep up to date with changes in government contracting regulations. So as a person, it's like I have my accountant, I have my bookkeeper to keep me overall in line. But as an individual, is there anything that you would recommend that we do, even outside of just the keeping up with the laws and the regulations, but keeping up with ourselves as spenders and managing our own accounts? Is there anything you can give us on that?
Yeah, the main thing is not to mix your personal with your business. Don't run personal transactions through your business. Whether you have a federal contract, a state contract, a local contract, it doesn't matter. Regardless, don't run personal expenses and personal income through your business account. It should only be the business, and that's it. Nothing else. So if you have a credit card and you say, I don't have a business credit card, I just use this one personal card, that's fine. You can do that. But that credit card should only be used for the business. Don't use it for personal at all.
Clear line of delineation. Hopefully everybody on here has a business bank account. I'm not going to say raise your hand, yay or nay, but you should, and just get in the habits of ensuring that you are separating those things. Sometimes it can be hard. Sometimes you need them. If you have a contract or you have money running through, it may be challenging not to use it, because I know I'm guilty, you know, so you just have to make sure that you're keeping that stuff separate. And if you do need money from your business, then the best way, that's to make yourself an employee, right, Janelle? Is that
when you're small, a lot of folks take money, just take cash out of the business. Don't do that. It's always better for you tax-wise to be set up as an employee and be paid, compensation every pay period. And that's actually something that the folks that are reviewing your proposals, they will look at to see if you're an employee of the business.
Wow. So in that proposal, like, because some of them I see they're asking for resumes. So is that something that we should always essentially include, that we are an employee, whatever position we, I guess, choose, an employee of the company via resume?
Yeah, I mean, that's fine to say that you're an employee of the business. You want the folks that are reviewing your proposals to see that you are an employee of the business. Because if you're not an employee of the business, then they know you're taking money out of the business.
Ooh, that's like, I wish I had a hand clap for that. That is so key. Again, I'm transparent, I'm guilty. So that's like, she's telling you like a threefer, like the taxes, you're going to be killed on taxes if you're just taking money out. And then you have the contracting officer, essentially, if they know what they're doing, they're going to be like, how come this CEO, they're putting this up as a CEO or the president, why are they not on payroll? And then it's like, they know you're, itty bitty business, or you don't have an accountant, or you're not doing it the right way, and they can pick up on all that. Right? That's really, really key.
The other thing too is that they will look at not only the folks that are reviewing the proposals, how much you make, your compensation level. We've had clients that were taking just a little bit of money and everyone else was paid more than them. That becomes a question. Why is that? Why are you not being you should be, as the owner of the company, you should be the most highly compensated, unless you can justify why you shouldn't be. Because I have this neurosurgeon who's on, in our company, and he's on a contract, and I have this lawyer that works, represents the president of the United States, kind of deal, that gotcha. Sort of thing. Then that's justifiable. But those are just some small nuances that you should keep in mind, as you're operating your business.
And to that point, a lot of people will come to me and say, why am I not winning contracts? And, the agency can give you they can give you like a back brief, they give you a debrief, and they could point out a whole bunch of stuff, but then they probably will point out a whole bunch of stuff if they see that the foundation isn't right either. So there's times where I have won a contract and then the agency asked me for stuff after. But if I was, if I looked real shaky or raggedy to them, then I just didn't win, because you want the lowest bidder, because you didn't provide this one document. Whereas if they really wanted me, they would have just told me to give the document later. So they may have told you didn't win the contract because of ABC, but it really was DEF, and you didn't even know that was the main reason why they're like, I don't trust this company. This doesn't make sense. So keep that in mind too. All right. So we talked about DCAA audits. Is there anything else you wanted to add? Like as far as what you told me about the one that you did it in 30 days, that was like a savior. But any other thing you want to add to that?
The main thing is, I mean, when you're a government contractor, if you're an 8A certified contractor, you have to have an audit on your if you have over 300,000, I think it's over 300,000. Well, actually, when you're 8A certified, you have to be audited. It can either be a review or an audit. So there are three levels of audit. There's what's called a compilation. And a compilation is they just take your information. They say, okay, ask you some questions. It makes sense. Fine. They pull it together and they say, okay, this is a compilation. The compilation is what you'll need if you get a letter from DCAA that wants to see if you had an audit. If they send that to you and they say, we want to do want you to answer the SF 1408 questionnaire, and we want to see the audit, you can submit a compilation. Now, a compilation might be $1,000. The review could be $7,000. The audit is maybe $14,000 or $15,000.
And that's with a company that I, as a contractor, hires. I hire an audit company, or am I okay? Before the audit before the audit.
They are the ones that perform the audit. The audit firm
gotcha.
is who you would contract with. And so when you're at the beginning and you're starting out and you're trying to get compliant and you're trying to show that you have a DCAA compliant system, they're going to ask for an audit. You don't have to do the full audit. You can do a compilation, which is a lot cheaper. Okay.
Sounds like it all circles back to trying to be compliant from day one.
That's exactly right.
I'm going to say that 10 more times because it's something that is near and dear when I had to go back and pay extra. Even before Janelle, I had to do that with another company for the previous year. So it's not fun to be under duress and then having to pay a lot of money at the same time in a short period of time to get something done. So yes. I seem like we kind of touched on a lot of this stuff. So you mentioned QuickBooks is cool, Deltek. You talked about, what was the other one?
Uninet,
Jameson. I think I actually am familiar with Jameson from the military. I think that's the system that they used. So these are all things. QuickBooks, start with QuickBooks, folks. Okay. So how do you help government contractors with budgeting and forecasting for their projects? You touched on this a little bit. So setting up their, you said their it was the management section. What'd you call it?
Your chart of accounts needs to be set up so that you're capturing your costs in buckets. That's the way we describe it. It needs to be captured in buckets. So you have your direct costs, which is one bucket. These are all the costs that are directly related to the contract. These are the eligible costs that you budgeted for. Okay. Those are what go into your direct costs, which is your cost of goods sold or your cost of services. Then you have your indirect. And then you have your fringe, then you have your overhead, and you have your G&A. So you need to make sure that all of that is set up so that you can do, and first you have to have an annual budget. That's where you start first.
What is an actual budget? Like if I'm starting today, I'm signing up with Global Strategies, and you're telling me I need a budget, and a contract is awarded to me tomorrow for $1 million, and using the example that we used earlier where it was like $250,000 profit. When you say budget, does that mean that we need to sit down and figure out how I'm going to map out all the indirect costs, all the direct costs, all my profit, my payroll for myself as an employee, and everyone else's salary? Like, what does that budget look like?
So your budget, you have two budgets. You have the budget for the contract, and you have the budget, your operational budget. You always start off with your operational budget. Everyone should have an operational budget. What does that mean? That means just the cost, the budget for the cost that to run your business.
To keep the lights on.
To keep the lights on, your marketing, your rent, your administrative salaries, all of that. Because if you have your infrastructure laid out the way that I just mentioned about having your direct and then your indirect costs, then you can use those buckets to start calculating, another term, indirect rates, which is what you need in order to prepare a successful budget proposal.
So with that, if I have, 5 contracts and I am trying to, I guess, budget to keep the lights on, I'm budgeting in that into this 6th contract, for example. Am I charging the government only a percentage of my actuals, like of my overhead? So if I have 5 contracts, 1 on the way, am I just charging a certain percentage of my overhead because the other contracts are also covering my overhead? Does that make sense of what I'm saying?
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. So let me just kind of backtrack on that a bit. So when you create your operating budget, you come up with your indirect rates, your overhead, maybe 5%, your fringe running around 18%, 17%, or your G&A around 15%, 14%. When you do the proposal, you can calculate that into your budget for your proposal. Those rates, those are allowable rates, because you have to have what that percentage is so that you can include it in your budget. And this is where government contractors go the wrong direction when they don't have enough money that they're making off their contracts, because they either guessed what it would be,
yeah,
and it was too low, or they didn't include it. So the perfect example is a labor contract. You bid $20 an hour. That's how much you're going to pay that person, $20 an hour. And that's what got approved from the procurement officer, $20 an hour. Well, the person you hire is going to make $19.50 an hour. That does not include your fringe matching piece, your FICA and Medicare, employer portion. It doesn't include benefits, the percentage of benefits that's attributed to that. So you're already starting off losing money.
Wow. Okay. So I want to just kind of make that, I guess, a little more digestible. So the example that Janelle just gave was essentially you're paying somebody $19.50 an hour. You're paying them that, and that's just the base amount that you're paying them. And then you're charging the government $20. But if you have service contracts at the bottom of, usually the contracting officer will send you the wage determination based on that specific industry or whatever that specific hire is. But even in the contract or the solicitation, it will show what those fringe amounts are. And they're on or around $4 or $5. Let's just say it's $4. So already you are supposed to be charging the government at least $23.50. But that also doesn't include the taxes. So you're already starting off in the lose, even without the fringe, but then you forgot about the taxes as well. So you're looking at probably more around $28 to $30 per hour just to pay them. not including what you should be making as a profit on that contract. So, that's why, that's just for an individual laborer. Again, not including overhead and if you have to provide supplies, if you have to do any of those other things, that price goes way, way, way up. But you said labor contract, but still, sometimes if you have to provide supplies, then it goes way, way, way.
Because even, let's use supplies, for example. You're providing computers, let's say, to the government, and you didn't include the freight costs. You just included the $1,000 for a computer, but you forgot about that extra $250 in freight. It's
Absolutely.
not included. So this is why we still go back, and you'll hear me say this constantly, is the accounting system that you're using has to be set up to capture all of these buckets so that you can do your budgeting for these proposals accurately.
And rinse and repeat for the next contract. So it's, as you do more, essentially, hopefully, if you're staying in the same industry, it should be easy to kind of even recognize it at the onset. Like, okay, this one is similar to the one that I had before. I know I'm going to charge this amount to the government and this person's going to get paid this. And even with that, I want to just add, we were hiring during COVID, and that was a very rough period of time because post-COVID was in the midst of this unemployment frenzy. So nobody even wanted to work. So now you're paying people way more. Nobody could have predicted it, but paying people way more than you normally would even pay, especially for laborers where you could pay them $12 an hour. That was pre-COVID price. Now it's $25 an hour, and that's just to pay them to walk out of their door. So that's also something to consider. Like, we may or may not go back into a pandemic, but also preparing for the known unknowns. You don't know if something is going to happen. You don't know if someone quits and you need to hire someone immediately. You may have to pay them a little bit more. So, Shanita, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I have a question because I can't be the only one on here that hasn't won a contract yet. I'm getting close though, but I have not won a contract yet, right? So technically, I know I'm probably going to use QuickBooks, but I haven't really gotten there yet. So I guess my question is, for us that have not won contracts yet, but we're actively bidding, what should we be doing, especially when it comes to our overhead costs? Because like right now, our overhead costs may be low. We may just be paying for, insurance or phone or, just the basics, like when it comes to it, until we actually get to that contract.
Do you have, if I were to ask you to send me your P&L and your balance sheet, could you send that to me right now?
I could make it up.
Okay. So that.
That means no, because so I'm in finance also, but I have no desire to do this. So I'm very familiar. I do chart of accounts for a living, and I have no desire to do this for my own business. I just want to go ahead and let you know that. So I'm very familiar with the lingo and kind of everything else, but you are definitely speaking my language when it comes to a lot of these things. But no, ma'am, I'm not going to do this.
So when you say that you haven't won any contracts yet, what you need to be working on is getting your accounting system in place, period. You need to have that in place, because with you not having that in place, that already tells me that your finance narratives, your budget narratives are incorrect. They aren't enough. You may not be capturing the right numbers, the right costs. I mean, because you don't have an accounting system in place. You have to get the accounting system in place. The client that I told you who had $25,000 for his first contract, he paid us $150 a month to get started. We knew that he was going to grow because he was aggressively going after those contracts.
That's Shanita. Look, that's Shanita. She's working on 7 at the same time.
and soon. Come on now.
All right now. Good. Well, nurturing those relationships. But we got his accounting in place first, because on some of those proposals, they will ask, do you have an accounting system? What is your accounting system that you're using?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So you want to have that already done. Take your time and get it done. Have somebody, like, we can do that. We can just set up your system for you. And then you work on it from there. And then when you're ready and you can afford, you can bring somebody on, whether it's us or not. But again, make sure they have an accounting degree. 2, make sure they work with government contracts, all kinds of government contracts. Now, just a little sidebar, you can get nonprofit type of funding too as a government contract.
Yeah.
Okay. So those aren't guided by, those are managed, or the oversight is OMB circulars. Those are what monitor, kind of guide the whole contract process and the rules, whereas for-profit is more the FARs. Okay.
Now, I have one other question. I'm sorry. Do you also assist with establishing the different accounts? So, for example, since I do work in this world, I work in a lot of funds. So like my bank account, I see having a tax account. I see having an operating account. I see having an income account, kind of things like that. So do you also advise and help to set up those different accounts for the different purposes?
Sheena knows what I'm getting ready to say. The more bank accounts you have, the more it's going to cost you on your bookkeeping. That just drives your price right up. Your accounting system manages the segregation of your funds.
Okay.
Not your bank accounts.
Okay.
Don't use your bank accounts to do your accounting, because that's what you're saying right there.
Okay.
And I know exactly.
Makes a lot of sense.
With profit first,
Yes.
I started off like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I will even say, for me to track, it was a lot. I mean, it was just really, really challenging. And I didn't know if I was using the right thing at the right time, and then trying to recollect all that stuff. I get exactly what you're saying, but that's a good point, Janelle. Like, you're using QuickBooks to manage that. Like, if you have one bank account and QuickBooks is able to disseminate what goes where, then you just solved that problem, essentially.
That's right.
It's like putting the money in the different envelopes and labeling them like vacation, childcare and all that. It's like, okay, but it's more like the discipline of QuickBooks that can just resolve all of that.
Right. And you want your accounting system to do that work, not your bank accounts, because when we have clients that come on board that have multiple bank accounts, multiple credit cards, multiple Cash App accounts, the price just keeps going up on how much it costs to manage their books, where they could have one bank account and one credit card.
Yeah.
So you could reduce your price almost by half.
It's a lot.
I'm glad I'm talking to you now. I only have 2. So
don't open anymore.
Seriously. Yes, I totally get that. Anyone else have any questions? Don't make me call you out. Is it Cornelia, Daniel, Garcia, Melita, Matthew? Any questions? Okay, y'all just in learn mode.
Are you gonna leave your contact information in here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And she's also in the.
I didn't catch the first part of the meeting. I was at an appointment, but it was a lot of information that I want to go over again.
Yeah, the replay is going to be in the group once it. I think it takes a couple of hours, so once it hits, then you can go back and watch the replay. We just talked about essentially what's the point of winning $1 million contract if you don't know how to spend the money, and that's for yourself as a contractor and within the contract. So she dove into that quite a bit on how to set it up and, you know, how to write out your budget. I'm at a surface level, obviously, but some of the things that we didn't, as new contractors, we don't really know, or we didn't know how to do because we're newbies. And so, you know, there's a lot of things, a lot of known unknowns.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Sure. Any questions? Oh, go ahead.
Sheena, hey, how are y'all?
Good.
So I didn't even get started yet. I try to put my information, my business in the system, and I keep getting rejected. So I haven't even set up my SAMs. So I want to do a consultation, but I do want to do everything right and get with Janelle once I can get everything situated. So how would I be able to contact you for a consultation?
Oh, for me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You can just go back to Sheenapreneur.com.
Okay.
Yep. And it's just book a consultation. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Janelle.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
Cool.
Yeah, the SAMS system,
Sam,
they just changed it, so it's supposed to be new and improved and easier to use. It is not. It is.
I'm getting better. You really have to get into it.
Yeah, it is. It can be a challenge, but if you have a problem that it keeps getting rejected, call over and over and over and over and over.
One more time and over.
That's right, because what the squeaky wheel is the wheel that's heard. That's the one that gets the attention. I mean, we've been in business 14 years and we have to renew SAMs every year, as everyone else does. But it's tricky, you know, if you make a mistake, it's hard to go back and fix it without it locking you out and telling you that there's a problem or whatever. So you have to just be a nag.
Yeah. And also I want to add to that. I had an issue. I can't remember what it was, but I called, me and a team member that works under me called a couple of times, and I got to like the fifth person, and that person literally was the only one that could fix it. They were like, yeah, a lot of people don't know this secret way. I'm like, this is crazy. Like, you all work for the same company. So to her that sentiment, absolutely, you know, make sure that whatever needs to be fixed, they can tell you, because somebody's going to know. And the calling definitely helps. So Matthew, you have a question?
Yes. So I know it was mentioned that these agencies look at your how your accounting system set up. Is that during the award process, or is that like throughout the project? It's because the reason why I'm asking is, you know, I'm working on these 2 solicitations, and it requires for me to actually have people under me, and I don't have the accounting part set up yet. So you know, what I'm trying to get at is like, when do they come? When do they actually look at your books and start requesting to see if you have that infrastructure set up?
If you're going for a okay, so a couple things could happen. One is if you're going after a DoD contract. In order to get a DoD contract, they will do a pre-audit, which is your SF 1408 that needs to be completed. That's where they are looking at your accounting system. Now, some contracts, they don't. I mean, we have a government contractor that provides equipment. They've never been asked to look at their accounting system. But it's the proposal that you have to look at. The proposal will say you have to have a DCAA compliant accounting system, or it may say you must have an accounting system that is set up with GAAP as a GAAP accounting system.
I've heard of that.
You see what I mean? It'll say something like that. You have to look at the language that's in the proposal so that it'll prepare you as to what you might need later.
So it's fair to say that we put together a proposal and we skip that page. But upon award, they may say, you show me your accounting system. And so then now it's like, help, Janelle, I need help right now. and that would be essentially setting up the chart of accounts based on whatever it is that I guess propose for.
So it's not just that. If you don't have an accounting system, but you've been working, doing business for 2 years, let's say, they're going to want to see that history.
But, all right, for like the majority, like for my example, right? I had no business yet. I haven't had a contract yet. So would that even be like a disqualifying factor?
So you haven't had a contract yet, and you're going after a contract?
Yeah.
We believers over here, Janelle. We're believers. We're believers.
Of course.
So okay,
With that in mind.
Believers, let me just make a recommendation. Okay. If you haven't had a contract, a government contract, the likelihood of getting one without having prior experience with a contract is a lot slimmer. Now, it could happen if you know somebody, but if you don't, so what do? You want to get into the government contracting space? You start partnering with people who are in the space.
So then they look at the subcontractor at their books?
No, not at all. So, but again, you got to look at the proposal. So what typically happens, you're a new business. What I recommend with you, and let's just say your line of business is providing doctors. I'm just going to use that for example.
He's in medical. That's so funny.
Oh, wow. Okay. You provide doctors. Okay. And you want to get into this business. You don't know anyone. When you see a proposal and you see a pre-bid meeting, you go to the pre-bid meeting and you network and you try to partner with some of those folks there, because you're bringing something. You got some great doctors, they're neurosurgeons, and this contract needs all that. You got all of that. So you already got a reason for people wanting to participate with you. That's how you get in the door as a sub on the contract, which will then position you to go in as a prime on other contracts, because now you have the clause.
Okay, and then my final question would be, would it be more acceptable to, after getting an awarded contract, set up the accounting system?
Okay, I'm always going to say you need to do that on day one.
Okay.
One of the things I wish I knew.
On day one, your accounting system, that's one of the first things you do. Set up your bank account, then you go to set up your accounting system.
Right, thank you for that.
Somebody else had a question. I saw the hand raised.
How many of you all go to pre-bid meetings? Does anyone go to a pre-bid meeting? Can you just put your hands up if you do?
Either do the raise hand or actually raise your hand.
Okay.
Melita and Shanita.
So 2 people go to pre-bid meetings. That's 3. That's where you make it's all about networking.
It is.
Especially if you know that the person who won the contract last time is there to go for it again. Get to know them so that they use you.
Be friendly. They're not automatically your enemy.
That's right. And especially if you have if you're hub zone or you're 8A or you're disabled vet, I mean, any of those are a WOSB for women-owned small business. If you have any of those designations, you got value.
You're bringing the cards.
That's right. So you go to the pre-bid meeting with your credentials that you have, and you start networking. And you don't have to just network with one person, one company. You can bid with 3, 4 companies unless there's a MOU, memorandum of understanding, that says that you won't compete with another company.
Yes. So that's one of the things that I had a hard time understanding when I started was, you know, if they're in the same industry as me, like they're my enemy. But no, like, especially if you have a designation, like she mentioned, Hub Zone, 8A, woman owned, SDVOSB, veteran, then a lot of times the people that are going to these site visits, they don't have any certifications.
Right.
So you are bringing them something that they can't get without you. So you
That's
are,
right.
even if you're the smaller company, you know, you can flex your muscle a little bit because they can't do this without you. So that's the value you're bringing. Because people ask me all the time, they're like, well, I'm literally just starting, and how can I go to a big company and flex my muscles when I'm a small company? Well, your certification is heavy. It's like an Oscar award. Okay,
that's right.
So you bring that, and then especially if you are going to really want to execute, I know I shouldn't even have to say that, but you really want to execute this contract, then you will be just fine approaching a larger company or a company that you feel like is a superior in the industry with your certification. And of course, if you're a black female veteran, you know, you can't see them a veteran, you can see them a black female. Sometimes they'll come up to you and say, oh, are you certified? Are you, you know, that type of thing. So you really go to those site visits and make friends. And they might even be your sub where it's a smaller company than you. You say you won one contract and you go to the site visit and someone hasn't won any, but they've been doing, you know, this job, this thing for a long time, then you can use them as your sub. Give them the opportunity. And sometimes that role will reverse where you guys become best business friends forever. You just never really know. Site visits are very, very important. I'm glad you brought that up. For sure. Okay, so Garcia, do you have any questions? Daniel, Melita, is it Alexi? Okay, learning mode. Go to the next one. So you mentioned P&L and I think you said balance sheet. Those are like my least favorite, but but I have to know your numbers. And when you start getting a lot of money going through, and I don't even mean like a lot of money in the sense of like the amount, but you might have just a whole bunch of transactions going through. You're paying a lot of people, even if it's $100,000 contract, $20,000 contract, you have a lot of things moving through. So what are some of the reports that we need to be familiar with? Because even outside of government contracting, as you guys grow and you want to build this business to either sell or pass it down, you're going to be a pretty robust business at some point that still has to be familiar with this stuff, even if you're not doing government contracting. So what are some of the reports that we need to know?
Okay. So your standard P&L, but you also, and we
P&L?
use this quite profit and loss.
Okay.
Your profit and loss. I'm sorry. So your profit and loss, but there is your profit and loss by month report. There is also your profit and loss by customer report, or your profit and loss by contract report. And all of the big companies that we manage their books for government contractors, we set them all up with a P&L by contract so that you can see how much is being made or lost by contract. Because this is the problem. When you are looking at just a profit and loss statement, it just gives you the total. And it says, oh, okay, we made money. I made $100,000. But then you look at your profit and loss by contract report and you see contract A, contract B, contract C, contract D, contract E, all lost money. But only one of those contracts, contract Z, made $200,000. So
wow,
when you looked at the summary report, you don't see that detail. Now, when you look at it by contract, now you can look at it and say, oh crap, I need to make some changes. Why am I losing out on this contract? 9.9 times out of 10, if you bid on it right, the problem is overtime.
Overtime. Oh, well, you're about to make me slither out of this chair. That is the word I absolutely hate, because that was an issue in my business, I didn't even know that people were getting overtime. And I'm like, same thing. Like, why does it just seem like my payroll is so stinking high? And, you know, on the surface, it looked like this person is working extra because we really need them to work extra. But now by law, you have to pay them overtime wages because this person is working at multiple sites because they're the best. And you're not even thinking that their actual hours are going over, I guess, the legal limit, for lack of a better phrase. So now you're paying them essentially either double or like time and a half or whatever. And it would have been just cheaper to get someone else.
That's right.
So, that just made my head hurt. Ooh.
Yeah.
That's a really, really important thing. And I like how you explained the P&L by contract, because going back to what you said earlier, and for anyone who missed it, you could win $100,000 contract and actually not be billing the full extent of the contract, where you didn't even realize, especially when you have multiple contracts to manage, that you've only billed $50,000 and now it's September and the contract is about to end. And you're like, oh, snap. Like, I need to figure out how I can use it, like you said, the clean lines to spend this money up. But now you're under duress.
That's right.
So you're trying to figure out how to get this money, because in your mind, you just want $100,000 contract, but you never even got $100,000. So that profit is imaginary at this point. Because you, like you said, if you don't spend it, then not only do you lose it, but you lose it for the next guy, or even lose it for yourself if it's a option year that you actually get. So that's just a lot. Does everybody get that? Like, that was really, really deep, because, you know, sometimes you win $1 million contract, and even with the IDIQ type contracts where they win $50 million contract, then they may not ever get to execute on that contract. So for those who don't know, if I'm not mistaken, IDIQ contracts is basically like, we are awarding this amount of vendors for this project. And that's another thing to look at when you're working with people, because they may say, I want a $50 million contract, but they may not have executed $1 out of that contract. So it briefs well, it presents well, but they may have never actually done that thing. So there's IDIQ type contracts on the federal and the local side. So, you know, that's another thing when meeting people, doing your due diligence. They may say they're a bigger company, but they haven't really done the things that they said. So I'm not saying, you know, go around and like with a magnifying glass, like, what are you doing? But you kind of do, because when you're partnering with people, you're married essentially, because there's money involved now. It's even bigger than marriage, you know. Love will make you stay, but that money will make you violent. So you have to really be careful about who you're working with, and then also your own money and how you're able to navigate your contracts in order to be profitable. Because by the end of the day, the money's coming in, $100,000. That's what, like 9,000 or whatever, 8,500, whatever it is. Let's just say 9,000 per month, and you're just spending it as if you have the profit, but you didn't essentially map it out to where it was actually $100,000 for that year. Okay, so far.
Yeah.
Any questions?
I mean, those were all great points too, Sheena. Absolutely. You use your accounting reports, your financial reports, to manage your company, help you make your decisions, because you can have that profit and loss report by contract, and you're looking and you say, hold it, I've spent $30,000 in expenses and I haven't invoiced anything. That's what you'll see. So using your reports will tell you, okay, I need to focus on this. Now, the other report, there are two others, your accounts receivable report for your billings each month. You want to make sure that every contract has been billed. Every single one. Now, we always bill for our clients at the beginning of the month. We bill and we develop a relationship with the folks who actually approve the invoices. So they expect to see our invoices between the 1st and the 5th every month. They expect that. They know that Global Strategies is managing the bookkeeping for XYZ company. We know that the invoices, we have even had folks at Wide Area Workflow. You guys familiar with wide area workflow, wide area workflow is the system that you submit your invoices through that are defense contractors. So if you have a Navy, a Air Force, Army contract, you're going to use wide area workflow to submit your invoice. So when you submit it in there are folks in there that approve them and say, okay, this is okay to be paid, or push it back and say, just reject it. No explanation.
So what should you do? Let's hang on that for a second. I talk a lot about, like on my YouTube channel and everything, about delays in pay. Typically, that's not an issue on the federal side. It can be, but typically it's not. So I get rejected. My invoice gets rejected. How do I pivot? So it's already, I submit on the first of the month. The month has gone by essentially since maybe I've been paid, and it has been rejected. No explanation. How am I able to, I guess, essentially ensure that, how am I trying to ask this? So give me an example of some rejections. Like, would it be, it wasn't billed in the correct CLIN? Do they actually pay attention to that?
Yes.
The wrong address, the wrong,
yes.
our name, maybe the contract number not on there, all of that. So anything,
all of that.
Has anyone on the call invoiced for any contract, whether it's federal, corporate, commercial, federal, anyone actually submitted an invoice? Everybody a newbie? Everybody. So that's really important for you to pay attention to, because my first invoice that I submitted, Daniel?
Yes.
You
newbie.
have?
No, I haven't.
No problem. It's all love here. So with that, my first invoice was hot garbage. And it seems like it's so easy to do, but something like not having the contract number on there, like she said, will reject it. But you may have many issues on your invoice. So you're like, oh, snap, I forgot the contract number. But then it gets rejected again. And I would assume that the typical period of time is probably days. So it gets rejected maybe after day 4 or 5. Is that fair to say? Or is it an automatic rejection from what you've seen, Janelle?
It can be anything. I mean, the big thing is to understand your contract itself. What does your contract say in the payment invoicing section? That's what you have to follow. So you follow that, so you get rejected. It says you're submitting a labor only contract, and you're submitting the invoice for the labor only. Now, and you didn't attach the timesheets, or the timesheets weren't signed, or one timesheet out of 30 timesheets wasn't signed. It'll get rejected. So one of the things you have to do is monitor the portal or where you get the notifications. They either will send it to your email, or it might be in a portal. But on the contract, it'll say who the email address and phone number of the person who actually approves the invoices.
Make that person your best friend.
Exactly. You email them, or they may not have that person in there, but they may have the contracting officer. So one thing, as business owners, you need to give permission to your bookkeeper to call on your behalf. Do not let them call without you knowing that they're calling, because you don't want somebody to say something that is misconstrued, and they go back to another contracting officer and it's a stink. So just a FYI on that. If you're going to have somebody call that contracting officer who has the power of taking your contract away, you need to be very confident that they know how to communicate to them. So that's just a little sidebar. But the point that I'm trying to make is that You have to submit and prepare invoices based on what the contract says. This is really important. Now, you'll get a contract and you set up your invoicing to mirror what the contract says. But guess what? The government has changed where it goes, who it needs to go to, what else needs to happen. This typically happens when there's a turnover in contracting officers. They're being moved around to a different department or something. So now the new person wants something different.
I have had an invoice where they told me the writing was too small. Can I make it bigger? And that was a federal contract. And I was like, say what now? And this is after day 20. You know what I mean? Like, I've submitted it on the 1st, on the 20th. Now they're like, can you make the lettering bigger? And asked me, why did I code my invoices like that? I do a year-number. And so they were like, you sure you want to do your invoices like that? What? So those types of things Janelle's saying is real, but it gets even deeper because this is still a people business. And mind you, you spent for example, your last monies getting this contract prepared, and you you did the work, like, ooh, okay, finally, we made it. I'm going to submit it on the 1st. Should get paid around the 10th, the 15th. But you didn't even know it was rejected because y'all don't even check your emails. I'm just going to be real. I'm going to be real greasy because you know how I am. And you don't even check your email, so you don't even know it was rejected. So you're thinking you're going to get paid on the 15th. You haven't checked your email. It was rejected on the 8th. And now when you go to correct it, that clock starts all over again. It can very well, because it's based on submitting a correct invoice. Correct. So even if you correct that, oh, I forgot the contract number, and you're in haste, now you're under duress. So you resubmit it without even contacting whoever that person is to just make sure, is there anything else you saw on this invoice that was incorrect? And you go to resubmit it and get rejected again. Now you're like, oh my goodness, I still have to pay the people that are doing this job, and I don't even have the invoice for last month. So forget this month. I'm trying to get now it's like you're a person, a team of one on your admin team. It's just you doing all this, and you still have to try to keep the money coming in. Like, you still have to keep your employees happy. You still have to do all these things. So what she's saying, it may seem like it's a piece of it, but it's probably the biggest piece. This is your money. This is your money. How you can get to the next step.
That's right.
So I just wanted to bring that in there. And of course, we know in the local level that pay delay can be really, really real. So making that person on that solicitation, that award, whoever, like communicating with them before you even start. Hey, is this the right person that I need to be communicating with? I've had contracts where it had 2 separate invoicing processes. One that is totally like a REBA, not even related to state contracting. It's more on the corporate side. But they're like, oh no, all you gotta do is send an email to me. Well, thank goodness I asked, because I would have been going through this whole portal of trying to figure out how to submit this invoice. So that's super, super, super important. And if you don't have a system already set up, and you're trying to when are you going to set it up? Because you're bidding on contracts. So, because once you get awarded, it's go time. Now you're in a different, whole different mindset. That's just super real.
And keep in mind that when your invoice is delayed, your payment is delayed, but your people still got to be paid.
And so guess who the last person to get paid is?
That's right.
You. So if you have bills, that's irrelevant. That kid's college fund is getting drained. Honestly, like, if you're not able to get paid, you have a pay delay, you have to, that should be your top priority, is making sure that invoice is correct, making sure your people are paid. You're probably going to be the last one to get paid, unfortunately, and keeping the business going, because you can't really even spend until you know what the money flow is like, because you don't ever want to miss payroll. That's like the highest anxiety of anything in business, is literally not making payroll. So
now the other document that when you have multiple contracts, and this is what financial institutes will ask for, it's called a backlog report. or a waterfall report. Those terms are used synonymously. So the backlog report, what it does is it's set up by your contracts on one side, and then every year for the next 7 years or so, the amount that could be, if you used all of the dollars that were allocated on the contract, is in each column of the contract. So what it tells a bank is, okay, you've got through the year 2028, you got 10 million in contracts already. They want to see that. So you want to go ahead and create that backlog report. We do create those for our clients. They can be very, intense, because we will track every single invoice, how much was billed, how much was actually received, link all the pages. It's a huge report, but we send that to banks, and this is how our contractors get funded, from that document.
So the backlog, I thought backlog meant these are all the contracts that you have coming up. So you're saying backlog is basically all the like a snapshot essentially, and everything that's included in that particular contract financial wise. Do I have that?
So you have each contract listed, and in year 2023, you'll have the total amount that can be billed for this year. In that for each of those contracts, for each of those years. That and you show what has already been committed, approved, awarded.
Got it.
And so the bank sees that,
right?
Sort of like that.
Sort of, kind of.
Yeah, it is. You're right. You're right. It's the potential amount of money you're going to bring in revenue each year based on awarded contracts.
Got it.
I like
that.
Now, we also include a separate section of pending contracts, things that are in the pipeline that haven't been awarded. And that's just kind of, it's in italics or something. It's different and shows this is what could be part of this report too.
Like a projection.
Yes, exactly. So those are the reports that are used the most often. A backlog report, we've seen it. We've seen our clients get financing, loans, lines of credit from their backlog report.
Wow. That's really inspiring. I mean, because that's basically saying that's ghost money. We don't even have it yet, but the bank is like, okay, even the fact that you have the report is letting them know that you are managing at least future finances appropriately.
That's right.
That's a really, really good point. Something I haven't got yet.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So as far as your company, and I can give my personal bias, but I want to explain how you typically communicate with your clients. How often can clients expect updates and reports?
Okay, so we typically work as a team. We have a team that is set up that works with each client. Depending on how large the client is, we can have 2 accountants, or some of our very large clients, we have 6 to 7 accountants that support that client, all doing different things. So every client is assigned a project manager. That project manager is the primary point of contact for our clients. Our project manager, so whenever there's a question, the client can always reach out to our project manager. Once a month, every month, we meet with our clients to go over their financial reports. So now, there are a few clients, and I'm going to say a very few, because I don't have a whole lot of extra time, but I have a few clients that I offer additional support and I don't charge them, because I see they have the potential and all they need is just a little bit more guidance to get there. So I step in there. So I don't like to really say that because this doesn't happen a lot. Sheena is one of those clients.
I didn't want to say it. I was like, I was like, I'm gonna be quiet. I ain't gonna say nothing. And she's serious. She'll reach out to me and say, hey, we need to do a check-in. Schedule this consultation with me. And I'm like, you know, and that is really important. I go back to saying I had accountants in the past. For all intents and purposes, good accountants that were like, you know, in real estate, and they were recommended to me by people who make multi-million dollars, you know, in different projects. And I was like, well, they got to be great. And they sucked horribly. I mean, not even just because they didn't understand government contracting, but they really didn't care. And so, you know, it's really, really important to have someone that, of course, understands your industry, but also gives a damn. You know, it really matters because this is a sensitive topic. Talking about your money, your performance. I mean, I didn't even want to tell Janelle and her team that we lost those 2 contracts this year. I was like, oh, Lord. But it's always like, no problem. You know, we're gonna fix it. You didn't come to me before you bid on this contract, and might be slim profits, but we're gonna fix it. We're gonna work it out. And so that's the most important part to me. You know, and I have her on here, and you guys, the other webinars that I've done, you know that I haven't interviewed anybody. I haven't brought anybody because I'm like, you know, I don't really have a lot of people that I just bring on just for them to talk. It's people that I have worked with that I can give my opinion about, and that are really, really helpful and really doing this in real life out here. So I really love Janelle and her team. Everything she's saying is factual. I mean, the turnaround time to response is exceptional. I mean, because there's a lot of care there with the clients. So I'm one of the special ones. So I get a little bit more. I try not to be a nag, but you know, it's definitely appreciated.
That's all right. Well, we, as a team, we review the financial statements of our clients. So the project manager, we have weekly meetings where we'll talk about each of our clients and see what's going on, what's happening. I always want to know what are cash balances. Are they getting more contracts? Are they meeting their payroll each pay period? Any of those things. Whenever there is a kind of an issue there, either myself or my senior project manager, we will send me the financial statement. I need to do a deeper dive. I need to understand what's going on. And typically we tell the project manager, this is what you need to communicate to the client. Make sure you tell them this. This is a hard conversation, but you need to have it. So in terms of audits, we actually manage the audit for all of our clients. And what does that mean? That means once the owner, yourself, hires the audit firm, and even if you don't know which audit firm to hire, we will offer a recommendation, and we will prepare all of the paperwork, the schedules, the meetings, everything. We do 100% of everything for the audit for our clients. So even meeting with the client, meeting with the auditor, scheduling a pre-audit meeting with the clients, with the auditors, a post-audit meeting, all of the communication, everything. We do it all, 100%. We do charge for this. But if you want to, and especially if you're going for your 8A and you have to have those audits every year, you need someone to do the audit prep. And that's what we do, audit prep.
And I'll even say, with previous experience, most accountants are not going to meet with you every month. Let alone respond to, you know, whatever you're asking in a reasonable amount of time. And giving advice, not just like, okay, here's your report. All right, you got any questions? All right, bye. It's more like, okay, what happened here? You know, like really forcing you to be better. And I keep praising because with dealing with something that you're not really clear on, we're not super, you know, versed in this government contracting thing. This is the expert who's telling you how to make the most out of your money. And I'm just saying that because I want to praise her, whether, you know, essentially want everyone to do business with her. But even if you're looking for someone else, or even if you're like, you know, I am the best, I'm going to do it myself, being prepared to, you know, make the most out of your contracts and making the most out of your time and setting it up properly at the beginning. If nothing else, you need to at least have QuickBooks today. Period.
Yeah.
Like start tracking your stuff yourself today. Don't wait until you are like a year in and you got all these expenses on, and now you have to backtrack and figure out, because QuickBooks is a little wonky at the beginning, and it'll categorize stuff all kind of crazy. So start today with that. If you have any expenses for your business, even paying for anything, gum, so it can be tracked. Go ahead, Shanita.
I just had a question. Do you also assist with tax preparation?
That's the one area that we don't do. We don't do any taxes. We work with several tax preparers. We match the tax preparer with the client, and we do everything to get you ready to that point. Okay. So now we do work with the tax preparers in preparing the reports. When the tax preparer has questions and so forth, for our clients, they call us and we answer the questions for them.
Okay.
Also very helpful. Also very helpful.
Now, our clients that we do have some clients that we handle both their business and their personal. So when we're doing that, then we're literally handling everything for the client with the tax preparer, because we pay their personal bills. We know we have access to all of their mortgage accounts, their loan, everything like that. We handle everything at that point and give it to the tax preparer.
How much money you got to make to get that? How many millions?
Hold on, 75 million. Didn't she say 75 million a year? 75 million a year.
Got it. Because boy, yeah, that's a lot to manage. I'm just thinking about, even from a perspective from your team, that's a lot to manage and a lot of responsibility. So I can only imagine the ticket item that has to be on that, and someone that be able to afford it has to be well into the millions. So I get it. So that answered that question too. Your team is available. I mean, within reason, of course, available to help, because it's a very sensitive and very important topic. Oh, that's it. All right. So I'm gonna put Janelle's contact info in the chat, and I just saw the chat. My bad, y'all. The only thing, everyone is very appreciative of everything that you have to say, Janelle. And Melita, I'm not sure if you're still on the call, but she just mentioned, I understand the need for accounting system, but it's draining money before we make money. I had a recruiting system and I haven't won a contract yet. And it was a monthly expense out, and I'm waiting. So just like I said, even if it's just getting QuickBooks, the cheapest version, in order to track your weekly gum purchase, just do that to start with. Or even start with a spreadsheet, but track it some kind of way, your expenses and any type of income that you're earning for your business. Because it doesn't always have to be the government contract, and you could get a side job related to what you're doing, and then you still need to track that income. Because trust me, after a while, after years, and after a lot of contracts, you're going to forget some of that stuff. There's plenty of stuff that is uncategorized revenue. And one of the accountants on Janelle's team, like, this is $1,200. I'm like, I have no idea what that is. Now I'm at that point now where $1,200 could have been spent on anything. And unfortunately, I'm mad at myself that I don't know what it is, but it becomes like there's so much going in and out that you really need to get in the habit of tracking your stuff.
I mean, you can use Excel to track your information. I understand about not, incurring additional expenses. You can use Excel to just track every time you spend something, it goes on the spreadsheet. Every time money comes in, it goes on the spreadsheet. Just segregate your information by month. So each worksheet tab needs to be a month with the information. So you'll have the description of the expense. You'll have the vendor name, the amount, where the money came from to pay it. This is so important.
She's giving y'all a free game right now. I hope everyone is writing this down because she's telling you how to do it the free way. So I don't want to hear no excuses. Don't ask this in the circle community. How do I do that? Okay, because she's telling you exactly what to do for free. We all have Excel or Google Sheets. Okay.
Yeah, you just do it on there, and then you make sure you have the date, where the funds came from that you used to spend it. So if it came from your Aunt Susie's account, she loaned it to you, that's considered a loan. Yes. You see what I'm saying? Money that you got to pay back, or Aunt Susie donated the money and paid for that for you. That goes on the books a different way. What tends to happen when people don't put all their stuff together, don't document it, they end up having a higher tax liability, meaning they pay more in taxes. Because
you're giving the government money. You want, like, you're giving away the money that we all complain about giving away.
Right.
Literally.
You're absolutely right, because you're not capturing everything. A loan is not income. So now you don't remember what that $5,000 was for. Oh, maybe I don't know what it was for. So now it's on your books as income. And you're taxed on it. But it was actually a loan from Aunt Susie.
Yep.
Which is not taxable. So
and again,
put it in Excel.
Put it in Excel. And again, going back to say you're like, I don't care what Sheena or Janelle talking about. I'm going to wait until I win this $1 million contract. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute. Now I have to go back 2 years to do this thing to capture, because I had some money coming in and out a little bit. But now I'm at a higher bracket. So now I'm ready to get my accounting system. And now you have to, under duress, pay someone, anyone, to go back years on your books. That is a very, very high price. I'm telling you from experience. So
we have clients, this is a common occurrence. They will reach out to us and say, oh, no, we can't afford that. No, we don't want that. We don't want that done. We don't want the cleanup done. Said, okay, are you sure? They said, yep, we don't want it. We can't afford it. We come back maybe 6 months later. Just there's a contract that they look like they're going to win. The agency reached out to them and said, listen, we think we're going to offer you this contract, but you make sure you have all your stuff together, your books there, because we want to make sure you have your accounting and stuff. So then they come to us. Now it's a rush. Not only are they paying the fee for us to do the cleanup, now they're paying the rush fee too.
Ooh.
Whereas when I said before, we had a client who came to us, wanted us to do the books, didn't, said, nah, you're too much. I don't want it done. Came back to us 2 years later. I'm buying a house. I got to have financial statements. I said, this is going to cost you money, right? I told you to come back. Now, if you think that you can just get everything set up, that's not how it works. You say you've been in business since 2010, let's say, and you don't have any books at all. Well, they're going to want to see your financial reports and to see that all that data from 2010 is in there.
Ooh. You said you had the past performance and you've been doing this. Show us. That's all they're going to care about.
That's right.
Show us. Gracious. Okay, so we got any other questions? Because we're running down to 4 minutes, and I want to make sure I show appreciation to Janelle. So any questions?
No, not for me.
Thank you for the information. I was going to say, I do have one other question. Is there anything else that you see as a biggest mistake that you did not cover for tonight? Or is there a tip, I guess, that you want to do that you didn't already cover?
Well, the biggest ones that I mentioned, one, you got to have an accounting system. But two, don't commingle funds. And three, don't have 10 bank accounts.
Okay.
Maximum 2. Those are the problems I see all the time.
Every day. I'm sure.
Those are the major problems. If you do that, keep the bank accounts down, you'll do well. I mean, your fees won't be high. It's easier to manage things. Now, I know some people haven't spoken. Does anybody have a question that's specific to themselves that they really want an answer that I can help them with?
Oh man, this is free game, y'all. Like something with you personal. You don't always get that.
No one has anything. Does everyone have employees?
So I do have a question. I have this contract that I'm pursuing, and the lady that wants to do the work for me, she says she wants to assume as my employees. Now, the bid is due in a couple of days. However, you're saying having the accounting part set up. Do you also do it as if we have do it for the employees, like for the timesheets and so on and so forth?
So let me make sure I'm understanding. You're going after a contract. You have someone who wants to come on board as an employee to do the contract. Is that correct?
Yes,
okay.
her and 2 other people.
Okay. So often people will bid on contracts and the folks aren't hired yet. And that's fine. You typically include their resumes and you know that these people are committed to start when the contract is signed. Is that your question or answer that you're looking for? I'm just trying to make sure I understand.
My question is more focused on setting up the accounting for them. Well, would that also be something I need to do when it comes to having my accounting system set up?
So I always say have your accounting system in place anyways. You should be doing that right now regardless. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have any employees yet, you're going to have an employee for this contract, then you need to have a timekeeping system set up and a payroll system. But you can do that once you are sure you're going to have the contract.
Okay.
Okay. So let me just make sure everyone understands about timekeeping. Department of Labor will come in and look at your records if they get a single complaint that says you didn't pay them right. So that means all those people who aren't punching in, you're now going to be fined for that because they're going to do a desk audit. That's when they come in and look at your reports to make sure that everybody is punching in, punching out, or signing their timesheets. Or that there are timesheets. Do not get caught up in a DOL audit. They do come out. And all it takes is one person complaining that they weren't paid right.
And I want to harp on that because when I first started, before I hired employees and I was only using subs, I went to a conference and the gentleman on the panel was saying that it's not about if you get sued, it's when. And so that kind of hurt my feelings because I'm like, I'm a good person. Who's going to sue me? Mm-hmm. Employees are
in vicious. A heartbeat. Yes.
They are vicious. And anything that happens, you might think, oh, this person wouldn't do this. I've been treating them well. Anything can change that. And so all they have to do is complain about anything. If you text them outside of hours, that's getting more into HR. But like if you text them outside of their work hours, you had them do something that's not written in your policy, anything, you can be complained. It doesn't have to be legit. But now the agency has an obligation to see the legitimacy of it. Mm-hmm. So always make sure you're on your P's and Q's too. And this is even outside of the accounting system. This is just you as a business. You got to think like a big business because essentially if you get $1 million contract, you in the big leagues now. Mm-hmm. So that mental preparation.
I see Alexi has a question about the best practices for hiring employees and contractors, a mix of W-2 and 1099. That's fine. I mean, that mix is fine, having just W-2 or, you have to be careful with just 1099s, but your 1099 contractors, just make sure that they are working like under their business or,
There's a
You
lot.
know,
It can get tricky.
Yeah, it does get tricky, but to get started, yeah, that works for you. Go for it.
And I have a mix currently.
Mm-hmm.
I have W-2s and 1099s throughout all of my contracts, varying amounts. So yes, you can do that. Just make sure that you are following the regulation when it comes to federal and even state. There's still regulations. So just be super careful.
1099s, make sure they sign a W-9 form.
Yes.
Before you pay them, have them sign a W-9 form before you pay them. I'm going to tell you, people disappear when it comes time to file the tax returns or the 1099 forms that you want to issue in January. They will disappear.
Yeah.
And now you got to explain that. Why you don't have, and the last thing you want is IRS looking at you.
Yes. And a lot of times people don't want to report their income.
Right. And
So
that's why they disappear. So you get around that problem by having them complete that form before you pay them a dime.
Yes, that's automatic. That's a part of our onboarding packet. If you come and work with us, that's a part of our subcontractor packet. You got to sign this doggone document and all these other documents, because it gets real sticky when it comes to the money. So, what would you say is the benefit of using W-2 employees as opposed to 1099 contractors? That's more on the HR side, but I can give, when it comes to 1099 employees, essentially, or contractors, they're supposed to have their own insurance. That's basically like the rule of thumb. If they are not having their own insurance, then they're employees. That's pretty much it. Like if they wear your shirt, they're your employee. If people want to make people have them as 1099 so they can avoid, the tax obligation. But really, most people are W-2 employees unless they're paying their own insurance. Just use that as your rule of thumb. Now you can finagle that however you want. It's your business, but just know what may come with that. So, any other questions? It's 8:05, and this has been great. This is like really in the top 3 most important, probably top 2 most important things you need when you are doing any type of business. Because once that revenue kicks in, and you're going from, I was joking earlier with a friend about, selling oils. You sold, $55 worth of oils, and then you get a contract for $1 million. Your mind is still in that $55 oil seller. But now the government is like, I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to do, but you actually need to do it. You can't just pick and choose what you want to do. This is what it is. And guess what? You'll go to jail if you don't do it right. If you do it really, really wrong, you'll go to jail.
So I just have one last question. Do we just email you or go on your website in order to get my accounting system set up?
Shanita is my star student, okay? When she says she's gonna do something, it's gonna happen.
Good for her. Well, my email address is in the chat, so feel free to go ahead and email me.
Say less. Thank you.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay.
Thank you for today.
Go ahead. Who's that?
I guess Melita.
Hi.
Hey. Far as with owners pay, I've been trying to do some research on how do we calculate, once we eventually start winning contracts, how do we pay ourselves, like a deferred payment or deferred salary, or just keep a tally on like an IOU for yourself? Like, is that something that I guess is a part of this whole accounting process?
Well, you calculate how much you're going to be paid based on how much money is available to be paid. As Sheena said, you're last on the list to be paid. And if you have $10,000 left over after you've paid everything for the month, then you say, okay, I'm gonna add in $1,000 every pay period for myself. And I typically see clients, they will use their salary. It'll go up, it'll go down, it'll go up, it'll go down, just based on cash flow, because you're the owner of the company. Everybody's got to be paid before you. And so
Right.
you just,
But what about
now, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking, like, what about I guess the quote unquote salary that we have before we actually win a contract, all the work that we're doing leading up to that, writing the proposals, and doing all that research and everything that's leading up to it. I guess those admin costs, like, do we just say we don't have a salary until we get a contract, or what?
So a couple of things. So going from an employee to an entrepreneur is a mind shift. As an employee, you always think about, well, I still should get this pay because I did this. But as an entrepreneur, you can only pay yourself what's available. That's it.
Right.
That's really the bottom line. But you can say, you know what? All those years I wasn't being paid and now we're flush. I'm going to pay myself an extra $20,000 this time, this paycheck. You can do that. You're the boss. It's your company. If you want to do that, you can. I suggest you run it through payroll. Just don't take the money out of the bank account, so that you pay it through payroll and you have taxes taken out of it. But you're the owner of the company. When the company gets flush and you feel like you want to bonus yourself. But you just got to make sure you can still pay all your bills for today and tomorrow.
Next month. And I will say, I'm sorry, it's Melita, right? With that, I think I know what you're kind of alluding to, because in a lot of the solicitations, it will say you can't charge the government for any preparation of this contract. So if that's kind of what you were alluding to as well, they don't care how long it took, how much it costs. They don't care about any of that. You cannot really bill that as anything related to the contract. But to Janelle's point, if you're going to pay yourself a salary because you have money coming in from something else, then pay yourself a salary.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Janelle is like a gift. This has been overwhelming, even for me, but very much so needed. And you see her value, seeing what she is actually does with her clients, because I'm a client and I'm speaking 100% truth. And just really understanding what you guys can do for yourselves when you brand spanking new, no dollars, no revenue. Totally get it. I've definitely been there. She gave you that free game to just start off with Excel. If you got a little bit more, then okay, go over to QuickBooks and then just start tracking your stuff. That's like a huge takeaway for those who are like really zero revenue. And then also offering her services to get you set up right, because we all trying to win contracts. We're not going to say we're not going to win. So we're going in this thinking and knowing that we're going to win. So we got to set it up at some point. Set it up now before that money comes rolling in.
That's right.
Any parting words, Janelle? Again, I appreciate you so much.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed speaking with everyone. And, if you have questions, you can always shoot me an email.
She's very, very responsive. And Janelle, I want you to stay on, please. But everyone else, thank you again. Have a fantastic night.
Thank you so much, Janelle.
You're welcome.
Also, Sheena, thank you. And you will be hearing from me very soon.
Okay.
Cool.
I'll be waiting.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Have a good
you.
day.
Bye.